Malik Thompson was a quiet student by day, and London's youngest, most feared drug kingpin by night, until betrayal from the one person he trusted most tore his empire apart and vanished him without a trace. Malik Thompson was born in the heart of Brixton, South London, in a cramped two-bedroom flat on the 10th floor of a grey concrete tower block. The estate was a maze of identical buildings, all stained with graffiti and scarred by years of neglect. Life there was hard, and for many kids, it was a place you either escaped or were consumed by. For Malik, it was both a prison and a classroom. From a young age, he learned to navigate the noise, the danger, and the unwritten rules of survival. Raised by his mother, Denise, a cleaner who worked long shifts at both a hospital and a community center, Malik grew up with little, but never complained. His father was gone before his first birthday, and his mother never spoke about him. There were no framed photos, no stories, just silence. Malik never asked. At school, Malik stood out, not for causing trouble like many of the boys in his year, but for being unusually quiet. Teachers praised his handwriting, his neatness, his ability to focus. He was the kind of student who stayed behind after class to ask questions, not because he wanted to impress anyone, but because he needed to understand everything. He was hungry for knowledge, not just the kind in textbooks, but the kind that helped you make sense of the world. At home, he read whatever he could find, newspapers, second-hand novels, even financial magazines left on buses. While other kids played video games or argued in the stairwells, Malik watched. He listened. He learned. Outside school hours, the estate transformed into something else. Groups of teenagers congregated in stairwells and alleyways. Older boys cruised by in borrowed cars with tinted windows and loud music, laughing too hard, moving too fast. Money changed hands in plain sight, and sometimes, so did weapons. Malik didn't take part. Not at first. He was just a witness, but watching became studying. He began to understand the roles people played, the runners, the lookouts, the dealers, the suppliers. He watched how the police came in, when they left, and who they ignored. He noticed who got arrested, and who always walked free. It didn't take long for him to realize there was a structure beneath the chaos, a system hiding in plain sight. Despite his surroundings, Malik kept his school life clean. No teachers ever called home about bad behavior. He never got detention. His uniform was always pressed, and his shoes were always clean. He was the kind of student the system liked to forget, because he didn't cause problems but also didn't need much. Invisible, in all the right ways, and that invisibility became his greatest strength. He started to think about it more and more, how people underestimated him. How no one paid attention to the quiet boy at the back of the room, how they would never suspect that he was already making plans. By the time he was 13, Malik had started connecting the dots. He understood the value of being overlooked, of staying silent until it was time to move. The world around him was violent, unfair and full of traps, but he didn't want to escape it. He wanted to master it, not by force, but by thinking smarter than everyone else. He didn't dream of being a rapper, an athlete, or a celebrity. He wanted something different: power, control, and most of all, freedom. At 14, Malik took his first step into the world he had spent years observing. It wasn't dramatic. There was no gun, no gang initiation, no bold announcement. It started with a single transaction. He used 20 pana he had saved from lunch money and birthday notes to buy a small bag of cannabis from a local runner who barely noticed him. Malik wasn't interested in smoking it. He saw it as product. He broke it down into smaller portions, repackaged it with care using plastic wrap and small zip bags, and sold it to a few classmates in a nearby park after school. He doubled his money within a day. The rush wasn't from the money, it was from the process. Malik had always been fascinated by systems, and now he was inside one. He kept a notebook hidden under his mattress, where he recorded every detail: what he bought, what he sold, who owed him money, who paid on time, who didn't. Every number was logged, every risk calculated. There was no emotion in it. It was business, and he treated it that way from day one. He didn't sell to everyone. He chose his buyers carefully. Kids who didn't talk too much, who didn't show off, who were just curious enough to try but scared enough to keep quiet. He avoided people who bragged or posted on social media. Malik understood early on that visibility was dangerous. He wasn't interested in becoming popular. He wanted control without attention. As weeks turned into months, his small operation began to grow. Word spread in whispers. Some called him the quiet kid with the good stuff, but no one knew where he lived or what his real name was. He moved carefully, making deals in places without cameras, never using the same location twice in a row. If someone got too familiar or too loud, he cut them off instantly. Malik began recruiting other boys from nearby schools. Not friends, he didn't trust friends, but acquaintances who needed money and had something to lose. He paid them well, gave clear instructions, and never let anyone know more than they needed to. They made drops, collected payments, and handed everything back at the end of the day. If someone didn't follow instructions, they were replaced. No warnings, no second chances. He also started investing in tools. He bought a cheap pay-as-you-go phone and used it only for business. He kept his real phone clean. He studied how the police monitored messages and started using slang and code words. When someone mentioned police in a text, he'd switch SIM cards immediately. He treated every move like a chess game, always thinking 3 steps ahead. By the time Malik turned 15, he was clearing more in a week than his mother made in a month, but she had no idea. He still woke up early, ironed his school shirt, and kissed her on the cheek before leaving for class. At school, he handed in assignments on time and kept his head down. Teachers still called him polite and focused. To the outside world, he was just another teenager. But in the shadows, Malik was building something bigger than he had ever imagined. He wasn't just selling weed anymore. He was learning how to run an empire, one deal at a time. By the time Malik turned 16, his operation had outgrown the back parks and stairwells of Brixton. What began with a few grams of weed and a schoolyard hustle had become a network stretching across multiple postcodes. He had contacts in Peckham, Camberwell, Clapham, and even as far as Croydon. He wasn't just selling drugs anymore, he was distributing them. And yet few even knew his name. Malik didn't show his face unless absolutely necessary. He avoided parties, never posted online, and changed phones every few weeks. His rules were strict, his network tight, and his control absolute. Expansion wasn't just about scale, it was about structure. Malik created a hierarchy. At the bottom were the runners, school kids, college dropouts, and part-time workers who moved small quantities and made deliveries. Above them were his lieutenants, boys he trained personally. They didn't know much about each other and didn't need to. They only answered to Malik. No one knew where he lived, or what school he went to. Most had never even seen him in person. He built his system, like a business. Runners had targets. Missed deadlines, or lost product, meant they were cut. If someone was late with money, Malik charged interest. Everything was written down in a black leather notebook he carried in a plain backpack. Numbers, names, drop locations, coded but clear to him. He called it his map, and he guarded it with his life. To avoid drawing heat, Malik launched a fake food delivery brand with the help of a friend studying graphic design. They printed stickers, logos, even uniforms. His runners delivered orders in branded bags that actually contained wraps, pills, and sometimes cash. The deliveries were fast, professional, and clean. From the outside, it looked like just another startup, but behind the logo was a growing drug empire disguised as convenience. To stay ahead, Malik also invested in tech. He paid a teenage hacker from East London to teach him how to encrypt messages, hide his IP address, and wipe phones remotely. He never stored data on cloud servers, only on burner devices. He even learned how to track his own runners to make sure no one was skimming off the top. And if someone slipped up, they disappeared from the operation without a second thought. Despite the danger, violence was rare in Malik's world. He believed chaos brought attention. Instead, he bought loyalty with money, and fear with silence. People didn't cross him, not because he was loud or ruthless, but because they didn't know what he was capable of. That mystery became his power, but power attracts enemies. As Malik moved into territories once controlled by older, more violent gangs, whispers began. Some tried to test him, by sending threats, ambushing his runners, or hijacking drop points. But Malik never responded directly. Instead, a week later their spots would get raided by police, or their own people would vanish. No one could prove anything. It felt like bad luck. But those in the know began to realize something. Malik wasn't just smart, he was dangerous. While others fought for street credit, Malik fought for control. He wasn't trying to survive the game, he was trying to outplay it, and for a while he did. With Malik's network now reaching far beyond Brixton, his presence was starting to rattle the foundations of London's criminal underworld. Established gangs, some with generations of blood and loyalty behind them, were losing territory, influence, and most importantly, money. Malik had done what many thought was impossible. He unified scattered street operations without violence, without headlines, and without leaving a single fingerprint. But the larger his empire grew, the more it disturbed the balance. And in a city where power is never left uncontested, it was only a matter of time before someone pushed back. The biggest threat came from East London, a crew known as the Reapers. They weren't subtle, their reputation was built on fear, knives, and bodies left in alleyways. Their leader, a man known only as Scars, had spent nearly a decade carving out control over Tower Hamlets and Hackney. Unlike Malik, Scars thrived on being seen, being feared. His crew wore black motorbike helmets and moved in packs. They didn't do negotiation, they didn't do smart, they did loud, fast, and brutal. Malik became a target not because he was violent, but because he was effective. His quiet approach was pulling money out of Scars's pockets. Clients were choosing reliability and discretion over flash and force. Runners were switching sides, lured by Malik's clean system and better pay. Scars couldn't understand it. To him, respect was earned with blood. Malik earned it with structure. That difference lit the fuse. One night, a pair of Malik's runners were intercepted near Bethnal Green. Their bags were taken, their bikes trashed. No serious injuries, but the message was clear. The next day, another delivery spot was compromised, forcing Malik's team to abandon thousands of pounds worth of product. For the first time in months, Malik's network felt pressure, but his response wasn't rage, it was precision. Malik didn't retaliate with violence. Instead, he started planting false information, tip-offs to anonymous police lines, fake location drops, and staged arguments that led rival gangs into each other's paths. Within a month, one of the Reapers' main stash houses was raided. No one saw who made the call. Days later, two of Scars's lieutenants were arrested in an unrelated traffic stop. Inside the car, 10 grand worth of drugs and 2 illegal weapons. Malik hadn't touched them. He had let the system do the work. The Reapers suspected someone was leaking from the inside. Distrust spread through their ranks like wildfire. Men turned on each other. Paranoia led to mistakes, and mistakes led to more arrests. Malik watched from a distance as their empire cracked. But while his enemy weakened, Malik's own world started shifting. To protect what he'd built, he was forced to tighten his circle. Fewer people were allowed access to key operations. Old allies were pushed out. Malik started using decoys to handle meetings and never traveled without backup. He wasn't afraid, he was calculating. Every move now came with risk, and risk required control. Though he had neutralized Scars, the message was clear. Malik was no longer operating in the shadows. His moves were making waves, and in the world he'd entered, waves always drew sharp. As Malik's empire reached its peak, he believed he had outsmarted everyone, rivals, the police, and even his own people. His system ran with near-perfect precision, his orders executed without question. The streets respected his name, though few ever spoke it aloud. But what he didn't realize was that his greatest threat wasn't from a rival gang or the law, it was from someone standing right beside him. Jamal had been part of Malik's inner circle from early on. They weren't exactly friends, but their history went back to those first schoolyard deals. Malik saw potential in Jamal, sharp, fast-talking, loyal. He was given more rival gang or the law, it was from someone standing right beside him. Jamal had been part of Malik's inner circle from early on. They weren't exactly friends, but their history went back to those first schoolyard deals. Malik saw potential in Jamal, sharp, fast-talking, loyal. He was given more responsibility than most, managing mid-level runners, organizing cash pickups, and keeping track of product flow in South London. He was reliable, and more importantly, quiet. But while Malik was building an empire, Jamal was building resentment. For years Jamal had watched Malik control everything. He watched him rise from quiet student to silent kingpin, commanding people twice his age, making money faster than most adults. Jamal played his part, but inside, frustration grew. He wanted more power, more recognition, more money. Yet no matter how hard he worked, Malik never let him near the top. Everything was compartmentalized, and Jamal was kept just below the ceiling. The breaking point came when Malik secured a deal with a foreign supplier, an Amsterdam-based crew known for their discretion and quality. The shipment, worth over £300,000, was set to arrive through a trusted contact, who used modified vans to bring product across the channel. It was Malik's biggest move yet. It was also the first time Jamal had visibility on a major shipment. Instead of securing it, Jamal saw opportunity. Without saying a word, he made a call to a lesser-known crew from North London, young, reckless, and hungry. He gave them the route, the time, even the van's plate number. In exchange they promised him a large cut and a new position in their ranks. The robbery went smoothly. The van was hit on a quiet industrial road in Essex. No one was hurt, but the entire shipment vanished. Malik was furious. Not outwardly, he didn't yell or threaten, but those close to him knew something had shifted. He went silent for 2 days, which in Malik's world meant planning. He didn't accuse Jamal. In fact, he pretended nothing had changed. He reshuffled his schedule, quietly replaced a few runners, and changed drop locations. But behind the scenes he was watching. He traced phone movements, compared delivery reports, and leaned on his tech contacts to recover deleted messages. Within a week, he knew exactly who had set him up. Jamal, thinking he had gotten away with it, kept working as if nothing happened. Then without warning, he vanished. His body was found 2 weeks later in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Lewisham. One clean bullet wound to the chest. No evidence, no witness. The police treated it like gang violence, another statistic. But in the underworld, the message was clear. Malik had dealt with betrayal, quietly, efficiently, permanently. The discovery of Jamal's body sent a chilling message through the streets of South London. It wasn't just about one man's death. It was a warning that betrayal had a cost far beyond money or loyalty. Jamal had been close to Malik, maybe too close. His murder wasn't a spur-of-the-moment act fueled by anger or revenge. It was cold, calculated, and designed to unsettle anyone who might consider crossing the young kingpin. The warehouse where Jamal was found was a forgotten relic of London's industrial past. Crumbling walls, broken windows and rusted metal. It was the kind of place nobody visited, except for those who wanted to disappear. Malik never went there himself, but he knew someone else had been there, someone acting on his orders. The method of killing raised questions. Jamal had been shot once, cleanly in the chest. No signs of struggle, no forced entry. The killer had either known he would be there, or had been waiting. Malik's men scoured the area for clues, footprints, discarded shells, tire tracks, but found nothing. It was as if Jamal had walked into a trap and willingly accepted his fate. This was a new level of execution in a world where violent acts often left evidence behind, witnesses, cameras or errant bullets. Malik's reach extended beyond just running drugs. It now included silence enforced by fear and precision. The police investigation into Jamal's death was slow and largely ineffective. They classified it as gang-related violence, but lacked witnesses or solid leads. No arrests were made. The official story was another young life lost to the streets, another casualty in a city's ongoing battle with drugs and crime. But for those inside the game, the truth was unmistakable. Jamal had been marked, and Malik was sending a message to his crew, to his enemies, and to the police. Betrayal wouldn't be tolerated, and it would be met with swift final consequences. Inside Malik's operation, trust became a rare commodity. Every contact, every runner, every lieutenant was scrutinized more closely. Phones were checked more often. Meeting places were changed. Codes were updated. Paranoia crept in like a shadow. No one knew who might be the next to disappear. For Malik, the murder of Jamal was not just about punishment, it was about survival. He understood that in a world built on secrecy and loyalty, one betrayal could unravel everything. And so he acted decisively, making it clear that no one, not even those closest to him, was untouchable. This act of violence, the though brutal, also exposed Malik's vulnerability. It showed that beneath the careful planning and cold calculations, he was human. He could be betrayed, hurt, and forced to make impossible choices. The ripple effects went beyond his own circle. Rival gangs took note of Malik's response, measuring his strength and ruthlessness. Some backed away, wary of what crossing him could mean. Others began plotting, seeing weakness where there might only be caution. For the police, Jamal's death was a piece in a larger puzzle, a hint of the empire growing quietly beneath the city's surface. But even as they stepped up surveillance and infiltrations, Malik remained elusive, his true identity still a mystery. Jamal's murder marked a turning point. It was no longer just about expanding territory or making money. The stakes had become personal, deadly, and irreversible. Malik's reign was on the line, and with every decision, he walked a tighter line between power and destruction. After Jamal's death, Malik knew the rules of the game had changed forever. The quiet Kingpin was no longer just a hidden force in London's shadows. He had become a target. Every step he took now carried greater risk. Every decision weighed heavier. He tightened his grip on the operation, but with caution. Trust had been broken, and paranoia was spreading like wildfire. To protect himself, Malik turned inward. He stopped meeting people face to face whenever possible, relying instead on encrypted messaging apps and burner phones. He limited meetings to trusted lieutenants, who had proven their loyalty over years. Even then, he used code words and false signals to confuse anyone watching or listening. His network began to look less like a community and more like a fortress. Despite the precautions, whispers started circulating about a mysterious new figure in Malik's inner circle. No one saw this person's face, but their presence was felt. They handled security, logistics, and intelligence, essentially everything that kept Malik's empire safe. Rumors suggested this shadowy aide was a former soldier, skilled in surveillance and combat, hired to ensure Malik's protection. Some even said this person was responsible for orchestrating Jamal's execution. While Malik's empire was becoming more professional and secretive, the pressure from law enforcement was increasing. Police had begun deploying undercover officers to infiltrate drug networks in South London. Surveillance vans dotted key neighborhoods, and drones occasionally hovered unseen. Malik was careful, but no system was foolproof. A few runners had been arrested, some turning informants, and the risk of exposure grew daily. One of Malik's biggest challenges was maintaining control over a growing empire without losing the personal touch that had made his operation so effective. He had built loyalty by paying well, being fair, and running a tight ship. But with so much distance now between him and the street-level workers, cracks began to form. Some lieutenants grew restless, others became careless. Rumors of disloyalty returned, and Malik responded swiftly. Anyone suspected of betrayal was removed quietly. At the same time, Malik's personal life grew more isolated. His school days were behind him, and although he had opportunities to pursue legitimate education or work, the underworld had become his reality. His mother remained unaware of his double life. He continued to keep his apartment spotless, his clothes neat, and his demeanor calm, a mask that hid the storm beneath. Then came a turning point no one expected. Malik's sudden disappearance. One evening, after a routine meeting with his closest lieutenants, he vanished. Phones went unanswered. Safe houses were found empty. Even his trusted aides were left in the dark. It was as if Malik had simply evaporated. The news sent shockwaves through the city. Rival gangs wondered if this was their chance to reclaim lost ground. Police intensified their investigations, hoping to find evidence or leverage, but no trace of Malik was found. Some whispered that he'd fled abroad while others believed he'd been eliminated by enemies or betrayed from within. His disappearance sparked chaos within his own organization. Without clear leadership, the carefully constructed empire began to fracture. Lieutenants fought for control, alliances shifted overnight, and violence flared in neighborhoods that had been relatively quiet under Malik's rule. The streets buzzed with uncertainty and fear. Despite the turmoil, one thing was clear. Malik Thompson's rise from quiet student to London's youngest drug kingpin had left a permanent mark. His legacy was more than just money and power. It was a cautionary tale about ambition, loyalty, and the cost of survival in a ruthless world. The mystery of what happened to Malik would haunt the city for years to come. Some said he was alive,
watching from the shadows. Others believed his disappearance was the final chapter in a story that no one wanted to tell aloud. But the truth, as always, was far more complicated. Malik's disappearance didn't just unsettle the streets, it shook the very foundations of law enforcement agencies across London. For months, detectives pored over every shred of evidence, following leads that stretched from local estates to international contact. His name, once whispered only in the shadows, now appeared in police reports, news articles and intelligence briefings. Yet despite the pressure, the trail grew colder by the day. The investigation was unlike any the Metropolitan Police had faced before. Malik's careful planning left few clues. His encrypted communications, burner phones, and secretive network made it nearly impossible to pinpoint his location or track his movements. Officers tried to infiltrate his organization, but Malik's system was too well insulated. Every suspect interrogated claimed ignorance or loyalty, and those who knew too much had a habit of disappearing. Amidst the dead ends, one theory gained traction, that Malik hadn't fled or been killed by rival gangs or the police. Instead, some detectives believed he had been betrayed from within his own circle, by someone so close that no one suspected. This insider was thought to have tipped off enemies or even orchestrated Malik's vanishing, hoping to seize control or protect themselves from impending danger. Rumors swirled about a secret meeting held days before Malik vanished. Some said he confronted a trusted lieutenant who had been siphoning money. Others whispered about a double cross involving a rival faction and corrupt officers within the police force. None of these theories could be proven, but each added layers of intrigue and suspicion. To keep the investigation alive, the police created a special task force dedicated solely to Malik's case. They dug into financial records, monitored known associates, and coordinated with international agencies. They scoured phone records for irregular activity and monitored social media for any hint of Malik's reappearance. But each new lead seemed to end in a deadlock. In the meantime, the city's underworld was adapting to Malik's absence. Rival gangs seized the opportunity to claim turf and influence, igniting a wave of violence that spread beyond South London. The once tightly controlled drug trade fractured into smaller, more chaotic groups, each desperate to fill the power vacuum. The streets became unpredictable and dangerous, with old alliances shattered and new conflicts erupting daily. Inside this chaos, Malik's closest lieutenants tried to hold on to what they could. Some sought peace with rival gangs, others formed uneasy alliances, and a few vanished entirely. But without Malik's steady hand, the network lost cohesion. The empire he built so carefully began to crumble. Despite the turmoil, the mystery of Malik Thompson remained unresolved. No body was found, no ransom demands were made, no credible sightings were confirmed. To many, Malik had become a ghost, an enigma that refused to be caught, even in death or disappearance. For the families of those caught in the crossfire, the uncertainty was agonizing. Some hoped Malik would return to restore order, while others feared his legacy would only bring more pain. For the police, the case became a symbol of the challenges faced when battling modern crime, how one person's cunning and ambition could outsmart even the most resourceful authorities. Years passed, and Malik's story became legend. In some circles, he was a cautionary figure, a reminder of what happens when a boy tries to become a king. In others, he was a ghostly myth whispered in the dark, a symbol of power lost and betrayal paid in full. But for those who had followed his rise and fall closely, the unanswered questions remained. What really happened to Malik Thompson, and who was the person closest to him that ended it all?
Years after Malik's disappearance, the city still buzzed with rumors about his fate. The silence surrounding his vanishing had become almost as powerful as the empire he built. Many believed he was dead, another victim swallowed by the ruthless world he'd ruled. Others whispered he had escaped and was living under a new identity, perhaps even running a new operation far from London. But the truth, buried beneath layers of secrecy and lies, was far more complicated and darker than anyone expected. Slowly, bits of information began to surface. Small leaks from inside law enforcement hinted at internal corruption during Malik's reign. Certain officers were accused of turning a blind eye to his operations, accepting bribes or passing intelligence to rival gangs. The deeper investigators dug, the more tangled the web became. Some said these officers had been instrumental in setting up Malik's downfall, betraying him when the stakes grew too high. One key revelation came from a former lieutenant in Malik's network, who had turned informant after Jamal's death. This insider revealed that Malik's closest aide, the shadowy figure rumored to be a former soldier, was not just a hired protector, but someone deeply embedded in the operations core. This person managed security, communications, and even handled delicate negotiations with suppliers and rival factions. Their loyalty was never in question, until suddenly it was. The informant claimed that this aide had secretly made a deal with a rival gang, leaking information about Malik's movements and shipments in exchange for a share of the territory and cash. The betrayal wasn't discovered until after Malik's disappearance, and by then it was too late. The aide vanished with critical data, leaving Malik vulnerable to both police raids and attacks from enemies. This revelation shocked many who had thought Malik was invincible. It was proof that even the most careful Kingpin could be undone by those he trusted most. It also explained why Malik disappeared without a trace. He had been betrayed from the inside, trapped between enemies and abandoned by his closest ally. The truth emerged slowly, pieced together by detectives, journalists, and insiders willing to risk speaking out. The aide's identity remained secret, protected by layers of legal battles and threats. Some believed this person was still active, quietly pulling strings behind the scenes, while others thought they had disappeared for good. For Malik's family, the truth was bittersweet. The young Kingpin they had barely understood was not only a victim of the streets, but of betrayal close to home. His mother mourned not just the loss of her son, but the cruel twist that ended his reign. She never learned the full story, but she sensed the darkness that surrounded his fall. The city, meanwhile, continued to grapple with the aftermath. Malik's empire had left scars, fractured neighborhoods, shattered lives, and a drug trade that remained violent and unstable. His rise had inspired others, but his fall served as a harsh warning. In the underworld, trust was the most dangerous currency of all. As for Malik, his story became a complex legend, a mixture of myth and fact, truth and deception. The boy who started with a small bag of weed had risen to become London's youngest drug kingpin, only to be undone by the very people he trusted. His disappearance was not just the end of a chapter, but the beginning of a mystery that would haunt the city for years. The story of Malik Thompson did not end with his disappearance. In many ways, it only deepened. His rise and fall had left an indelible mark on London's underworld and the city.